the beginning and do it. I'm very sorry about my clunkiness here. In terms of sharing, I'm always better sharing my whole screen rather than just the slides. So how's that?
Uh, yeah, it looks wonderful, Shelley.
Does that look okay? Well,
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. It's still early, 4 more minutes. Would you like to start now, or we can wait for a few more minutes so people can join?
Fabulous.
Yeah,
Fabulous. No, I think it's probably best to wait, if
yeah,
that's okay. You always need the
yeah,
thing, so I'll pop it back to the beginning rather than tantalizing you with the second page.
yeah.
I will
Okay.
just say, since it doesn't matter, before the recording starts, that
I,
that I'm really wanting this to be a very interactive session. I've got as many slides as you need, and Vin will share my email address, my personal email address, because I don't have an institution anymore at the moment. But my Gmail address, Vin's going to put that in the chat. And I really would love to encourage anybody to just, ask any questions or ask for any resources that you might be interested in the context of your particularly disciplinary context, which is what I'm mostly interested in. And I'll talk more about, kind of where the knowledge comes from as we go through. But don't feel that you have to just sit and listen. You can interrupt at any point, and I'm very keen to make it as helpful as I can.
yep. That's wonderful. Thank you, Sally. I will share your personal email with participant in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. You are really encouraged to engage actively with the speaker, and we hope you will have a really enriching experience at the conference this year to connect with speaker and connect with co-participant through discussion and knowledge sharing and learning. So I wish you all the best, and enjoy the conference and make the most of it. Thank you. Just 2 minutes left. Anyone would like to grab a quick um, cup of tea or water? Please feel free to do. I might need to as well.
That's fine. Yeah, you do that.
Hi, Sal. It's Lucy. Just saying your
I
chin.
saw you on the screen, Lucy Lou. How are you?
Good. Just want to say I'm cheering for you, and I've opened a little bit of paper to make some notes. So good luck, my friend.
Oh, you're darling. How are things going?
Really good. Thanks.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I'll catch up very soon. Cross over the ditch.
Yeah.
Go for a walk, hey? Well, my watch has just gone 9:30. So how about we start?
Yeah. Okay, perhaps we can start now. So hello again, everyone. I'm so excited to be the chair for Dr. Sally Humphrey's plenary speech today. So Dr. Sally Humphrey has worked for many years as a TESOL and language teacher trainer, and educational linguist in Australia and internationally. She has been involved in research using systemic functional linguistics for over 30 years, particularly to describe the literacy demands of a range of educational and social contexts. She has contributed to a number of influential research projects led by Professors Jim Martins, Francis Christie, Barry Derivenka, and Len Unsworth, and contributed to many research publications. Sally has also co-written a number of tertiary level textbooks and workbooks designed to introduce research and practicing teachers to functional grammar for learning and in primary and secondary schools. Thank you so much, Dr. Sally Humphrey, for agreeing to deliver a plenary speech for our conference this year. It's our honor to have you for our conference today, and thank you so much for your sharing. I really looking forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vin. this is a fairly ambitious kind of talk to look at distinguishing functions of nominalizations and what we call kind of the grab bag of abstract nouns in disciplinary texts. But I've been really, privileged to be able to sort of be around this incredible research dating back from the, Halliday's distinction of live and dead grammatical metaphor, which I find his metaphors just amazing. And, Jim's work in science with and social science with notions of ideation at discourse semantic level. And then more recently with Jagendoren and Jing Hao with looking at ideational discourse semantics and field. So it's been a real honor and privilege to get my head around some of this amazing research. And I don't, I take full responsibility for any misinterpretations that I present for the work. But taking responsibility means tell me about it and I'll learn more because these scholars, unfortunately not Halliday at the moment, but have been very generous in entering into clarification conversations with me. So drawing on Halliday's distinction of live and dead grammatical metaphor and these recent descriptions, what's called, ideation in field of discourse semantics level, I want to reveal some of the often overlooked linguistic challenges in both reading disciplinary texts and in teachers assessing student writing development, particularly the latter, actually. So I'm taking what what Jim has kind of characterized as a positive discourse analysis in terms of my perspective, and from an educational perspective, a strength-based approach. So according to Jim, and I really like this, dating back from 1997, I would expect that research in organising writing and constructing uncommon sense knowledge will be inspired by the needs of practicing teachers working in contexts where abstract language has to be taught if students are to progress with their learning. Now, I know not all of you are involved in educational applications of SFL, but I think you could agree that in all of these in all of the contexts that we are working with SFL, it's the practice that really brings up the challenges and progresses the theory in so many ways. From the point of view of a strength-based approach, I think as teachers and teacher educators particularly, being able to focus on what the student can do as a basis for further development has been such an incredible gift for me of SFL, of what SFL descriptions have enabled me to take a strength-based approach. Now, just as an introduction, I'm using and drawing on a model of SFL which understands meanings to occur at different strata, including stratified context of genre and register. So many of you will be, I think all of you will be familiar with Martin and Rose's model there in, as kind of presented in, firstly by Martin in English text, and then Martin and Rose 2007 is a very popular way of presenting this work. So this is the model that I'm working with, paying particular attention to the new developments in field, in ideational level, at discourse semantic level. We've known a lot about discourse semantics in mode as teachers, I think, for a long time, as we'll examine further. And with the kind of very, very popular appraisal model, we've been able to really address a lot of meaning issues in tenor and field. So we're coming into field from the notion of knowledge and disciplinarity. That has been, I think, exciting work for teachers more recently. Now, challenges for teachers in terms of using this work. I just wanted to kind of overwhelm you right at the beginning and just present the extravagance of SFL's meta language just in this field, just in notion of disciplinary knowledge building. I won't kind of, you may be very, very familiar with some of this meta language at the level of lexical grammar, at the level of genre, even at the level of field, but there's a lot there, and not only the words, the terminology themselves, but as Mary Schlepper-Grell has reminded us, the relationship between these concepts is absolutely crucial to our notion of meta-language, not just the terminology itself. So this is what I've struggle all the time to get my head around, is all of this. How does this relate to that? How do I understand this now as opposed to how I might have understood it 5 years ago? The changing responsive nature of this meta language drives many lesser mortals away from the theory, but here we are all attending. So I just want to focus particularly on how SFL meta language can best connect to the existing ways that teachers talk about the resources for knowledge building in their discipline. So we've got a lot of words that float around in my educational context, talking about technical terms, a big one, an abstract word, to analyze something, explain something, a content word. And in other linguistic theories, this whole notion of a shell noun in terms of abstraction. So how might we tease these apart? And of course, then we've got the notion of nominalization. And right up front, please forgive my erratic spelling of changing between British and American English. Sometimes it's my automatic kind of corrector that takes over, but I've also just recently been involved in a very exciting project, writing a book with Ruslana Westerlund and Olga Malon in a grammar book for the American publication. And of course, I've had to correct, my spelling all the time, or others have corrected it. So anyhow, apart from that, the concept of nominalization has been understood in so many different ways. We've got sort of concepts of morphological nominalization, zero derivation nominalization, where the word itself doesn't change, where the stress might change to record, as in a record. Psychological nominalization, which I never had realized, to have depression, to have anxiety, those sorts of things. And then, as Jim's recorded in a data unknown presentation that I found, notions of between text nominalization, within text nominalization. There's lots of stuff out there, just even on a Google search, that can kind of bring up different understandings of this concept. So I want to kind of, think of this from the point of view of professional learning in disciplinary education, which is where I mainly work, and think about it from the perspective of building teachers' meta language for different tasks, different jobs that they have to do in terms of literacy education. Some of you may be familiar with this problematic notion of a 3x3 toolkit. It's problematic in terms of its limitations and trying to fit things into boxes over the years, and I've changed it at times to a 4x4, which for school context, because they really needed the expression level to be addressed, and teasing out other ideational meanings to experiential and logical meanings. So it has been changed and pummeled, but I guess I'm not going to, use it in any way, or I'm not going to talk through the toolkit in this presentation, but I just wanted to sort of present it as the framing of a possible framing of meta language that kind of fits with the notion of toolkits of multiple levels and multiple kind of compartments, if you like, that people use to get a job done. So that's the kind of general framework that I want to use, and also to think about that we have a toolkit for a particular context, and so it may change. The tools we need, may change according to the particular context. And the one that I'm kind of going to be playing with mostly today is for what we call that broad group of genres, analytical genres, which from a persuasive point of view work to persuade an audience that a thesis is valid, and are very, very highly valued for assessing disciplinary content knowledge as well. And that's where the knowledge basis is particularly important. So I just want to kind of talk about, from the perspective of professional learning, I always find, what text do I start with? Like everything, teachers are interested in responding to texts, like what's this text saying, what kind of knowledge, what kind of learning is involved in this text, or from the point of view of students demonstrating their knowledge, have they managed to do that through text? So I'm focusing on verbal text, of course, because that's what I do. But of course, those of you who are involved in visual and animation and other areas, the same issue is there. So selecting text for productive analysis is always an issue, I think. What's going to sing a song? What's going to really enable us to be text whisperers in that kind of way of getting meaning from the text and being able to talk to it? Now, one thing that I always do when I'm conducting professional learning with teachers is to ask them for texts that they are considering, to be successful, and those texts that they are challenged by from their students, that they want help to understand what's going on in the text. So not just good ones and bad ones, but the texts that they want to learn from or want to learn more about. Now, this is a very typical example of a text with, teachers' response to a text that is less productive and doesn't sing much to me, where teachers are kind of focused on word level spelling mistakes or crossing things out without an idea of, I suppose in one, crossing things out, saying, comment, it's repetitive, that's fine. But things like very wordy and long structure, I can't see that in the text in a very easy way. So for me, the commentary that teachers need to make on a text or needs to be able to be, talked about, and not just in that text. It needs to be able to be generalized up to be able to see a pattern, if you like. So I want to just present this text. Jim's given me permission to use this. And I've used it many, many times since its first publication, I think in 1990. Oh, anyhow, this one is taken from a 1997 paper that Jim's made, and the references in my reference list there. But I want to just stop for a moment and give those of you who aren't familiar with this text a chance to read it through, because I'm going to be using it all the way through. Oh, sorry, need to give context just before to interrupt you. This is from a Year 10 student in social science in an Australian high school responding to the question, are governments necessary? Okay, so sorry about the hurrying you on. I don't like silence. It's not my friend. So we'll continue with this. Now, I want to just, kind of present this in its context of Martin's paper, of how he used it very, very productively, I think, in when he's talked about it. His major response to the text was, he says, writing of this kind can be embarrassing for students and a real worry for teachers who may, however, be hard-pressed to evaluate its shortcomings and show their students how to do better. So from that perspective of, you know, being critical of the text, Martin then goes on in this paper to revise and analyze the text from the particular idea of mode, of looking at the organization of the information, particularly focus on theme and conjunction. So, for example, he looks at theme choices in the original that are relatively empty or have marked themes, and looks there at how a revision may put in, you know, macro theme and hyper theme, and, you know, to use conjunction to be able to signal the direction that it comes. So he then also looks at how nominalizations, look, there it is with an S, that enable the prediction and summarizing at this macro level, with, you know, kind of the nominalization of, you know, causal kind of conjunction as well. So taking that perspective is a really, really helpful for teachers, because it's very often where teachers are busy, we're reading fast, and we have to be kind of guided through the text with careful selections of theme. So from that point of view, I think the work has been very, very helpful, and I recommend that you find that paper and or ask me for it and everything, and look more at how that careful unfolding of revising the text can really support that student and others who are stuck in the spoken mode when writing. However, I want to look at this from the perspective of field, and taking a strength-based approach, as I've kind of highlighted. So if we think about this, I just want to give a little bit of context. I presented this text to a group of teachers. There would have been 60 teachers in a high school in Sydney, and I just asked them to, review it. What do you think about this text? And it was very interesting. I was just learning about strength-based approaches at that time in my other educational work, and I was really struck by the level of attack, if you like, that came at the text, particularly from the English teachers in the room. And I know there are a lot of English teachers in the room, so it was pretty overwhelming. There was a lot of critique. And then a table of social science teachers quietly suggested they were in the room. And I found that the most amazingly positive response to the text, that these teachers who were in the discipline of social science that the text was written in could recognize that the student had developed some knowledge and was able to demonstrate that knowledge that was relevant to the discipline. And often, as Jim kind of absolutely made clear, unless that knowledge is foregrounded using the resources of theme and conjunction, as he noted, it's very difficult for somebody outside the field to find it. But discipline teachers actually are trained to find the knowledge, and that's what they're looking for. They're able to hit on those important keywords, if you like, that come out even if they are not in theme position. So we have to kind of think about, well, let's start from field and look at how we can appreciate what the student has done. And I want to kind of just ask a few questions about what meta-language do we need then to take a strength-based approach. The social science teachers didn't have a meta-language, but they were in the field. What meta-language do I need coming from the text a little bit outside the field to be able to appreciate it and share with my colleagues. So how did the social science teacher know that the student was in the room? How do we build on the student's literacy capability, the strengths, to support them to make more of their disciplinary knowledge visible? And how do we support the student to evaluate the field to create an effective argument? That last question is not going to get a lot of attention in this talk, but it's a pretty obvious follow-up to a concept of field. Just going to pause because I really do want to encourage people to just butt in at any stage, and so I'll keep sort of have a little bit of a to do that if that's thing. And also, Vin, just checking the chat occasionally if people do have a question that you think needs to be addressed as we go. Fabulous. Okay, so starting from the bottom, or the lexicogramma level, I've used this kind of coding that I use in my textbooks when they allow us to have color. And that is, green for the processes, because a clause doesn't go without a process, and then red for participants, and blue for the circumstances, and I've just used bold for conjunction there. So I really like using color coding for transitivity analysis, because you really do get a sense, and even in this text, of, okay, well, we do get a lot of red. So perhaps that's one starting point for those who have a good knowledge of transitivity, to start with using the tools of transitivity to see a pattern. So I can see that I've got a lot of red. So what's in the red? A fair bit of classification of local government, state government. We've got a little bit of classification there in the red. We've also got a fair bit of conjunction. So that tells us that we probably have some complexity in terms of sentence structure. So we can say from this grammatical analysis that we've got multiple clauses per sentence. It's grammatically intricate and relatively lexically sparse, even though those noun groups actually do have classification. The classification is kind of labeling, if you like, state government, local government, federal government. It's not classification that the student has kind of created as they've gone, or showing the deeper knowledge there. Logical relations are expressed through conjunctions, and that there are few nominalizations in that text. So the nominal group, why am I excited by the red? Why do we value nominal groups? So what we've got is this kind of the stability of noun groups, that, as Halliday says, the drift towards the noun over as we build knowledge. It's a storage system, if you like, and we can subcategorize in comparison to other word classes. So it is a very important kind of analysis to do in terms of transitivity, but it takes time, and it's limited in terms of what it can tell us about the field and knowledge. And that's why I want to look further up to look at field and discourse semantics, which I'll get to. But first of all, these kind of new understandings about field that have come up from the work of Martin and Doran himself in his PhD and post work, looking at types of field, where we can think about field from technical, specialized, everyday, looking at the components of field, how can we divide up field into items, properties, and activities that they enter into in a particular context. The structures of whether or not we have static field, where we've got taxonomies of classification and composition of items and their properties, or whether they're dynamic, where we've got a series of activities in kind of implication sequences connected by causes and conditions. So already we've got an extravagant notion of field. It's not, it's not just the subject area we're working with. It can be viewed from these perspectives, and I find them extremely useful, taking that top-down approach to analysis. So from that perspective, when we're looking at it from the perspective of, this analytical exposition that the text is presented as, we've got, supporting arguments that distill and relate static items and their properties. I mean, this is what we're looking for. This is our meta language, our tools that we're going to use to see what's going on in the text. It's not necessarily what the text is doing. So we're looking to see whether the text has supporting arguments that distill and relate static items and their properties into expanded and multi-level or tiered taxonomies. And Martin understands taxonomies as both classification and composition. We often kind of notion classification and analytical kind of structures, if you'll be taking a Crescent Van Leeuwen's sort of notion of how the different kinds of taxonomies. And also, is there a dynamic series of activities in these implication sequences to flesh out the cause and conditions? So just to flesh out that meta language, Martin presents this concept of static taxonomic relations in terms of classification and part-whole relationships of composition in diagrammatic form, where we can see how those relationships are made. I refer you to the many, particularly Martin 2017, which is in a reference list. It's a great overview of field. So in dynamic perspectives, we look at whether an activity is kind of stepped out into the moments, if you like, or whether it's not stepped out and compressed and condensed or distilled into a particular word, and we'll come to that in a minute. Also, whether it's cyclical or linear. So that's a little bit of kind of, okay, there's a bit of extravagance there in what we're working with in terms of a toolkit. So let's look at the text itself that we're working with, and we can see that actually there's a fair bit of taxonomizing going on there in terms of the, obvious levels of federal, state, and local. We also see that the properties are kind of stepped out, or that they're kind of related in that taxonomic relations as well, that we've got properties involved in those entities, and that there's a little bit of momented activity in a linear implication sequence. If this didn't exist, then schools wouldn't be looked after, and so vandalism and fighting. So there's the beginnings. Again, taking a strength-based approach gives us something to start with. Hey, look what you've been able to give more details here of how the state role is important. Let's see if we can do the same for other properties that you have mentioned there. So I find that a great confidence booster to students to be able to see, oh, wow, I can see a diagram that's got relations there that are relevant to the answering the question. Stopping there and just asking if there's anything that sort of sticks out at you. I'm very happy to address that, but I'll just go forward. Okay, so sorry, I just can't read the top of that. I just have to read the move you guys down. Yes, exactly. So what the teacher saw, I guess, can be answered by that diagram, is that the student gave evidence of being in the room, in the geography classroom or in the social science classroom or general civics, if you like, taxonomies with distinctive criteria for classification that are different from those used in everyday fields. And that's really what we're looking for in knowledge building when we're in a disciplinary context. Now, moving down from the top to the middle, to the level of discourse semantics, to the systems involved in ideation. And this comes from the work of Jing Hao, particularly her published PhD thesis, 2020, and work that she's done in contexts of education since then. And I've been very privileged to be involved in 2 of those publications, one for anyhow, won't try and go into details because my memory is getting old, but we'll, and part of, why I feel so privileged is because, unpacking this extremely deep theories that were developed from a trinocular perspective really did my brain in, but it's probably saving me from Alzheimer's as we speak. So it's, her notion of building a linguistic understanding of taxonomies involves recognizing language resources that construe them. So we can't just stop at seeing the diagrams. That's not addressing our students' need to know, how do I do it? How do I do it? So what Jean started with in terms of understanding these entities of, the terms, if you like, the things that are involved in the things from the perspective of field, the items, what she started with Martin and Rose's kind of taxonomizing, if you like, here, or framework of concrete, abstract, and metaphoric, and immediately noticed that there's a lot of problems here in terms of what's the difference between, technical and institutional, and all of these things that seem to be both and, or a little bit of unable to be reasoned about. And that set her off on a journey to be able to kind of really systematically characterize, for example, types of technical terms here. So this is just my use of her work, not her framework, but looking at technical terms from her perspective. They name generalized items that are defined in the discipline. So, for example, people as institutional entities, government, for example, items as generalized entities, so the items that can be observed and items that you need a microscope to observe, and those sorts of distance from the particular observable ways. Naming text and ideas as semiotic entities. Naming activities themselves that are defined in the field as activity entities. And I'm going to look particularly at that as we go through. Also at naming the taxonomies themselves and the properties as dimensions of entities. And it's those 2 that I think help us to tease out uses of nominalization and abstract terms, shell nouns, those sorts of things in a useful way. And then, of course, from the perspective of field, condensing figures, or which are typically represented as clauses, as grammatical metaphors. So we can see that grammatical metaphor is not just limited to the textual unfolding of predicting and summarizing, as Jim's drawn our attention to in the previous work, but it's also very implicated in developing field. Okay, so here's an image that has done my head in over the last couple of years, and that is taking this notion of nominalization from the point of view of mismatching, right? So we've got a way of distinguishing nominalizations that are activity entities from those that are grammatical metaphors in terms of how the kind of mismatch that is involved. Now, I don't pretend to understand all these, but I want to look at, this is just the kind of framework that we will use, the meta language, understanding the mismatch between field and discourse semantics as reconstrual, and the mismatch between discourse semantics and lexicography as remapping. Okay, so let's have a look at how we might look at this this work. So this is from Jing's work, stepping out this from the 2000 and in the notion in the concept in biology. So from a discourse semantic perspective, moments of activities, right? What we saw, these unpacked, detailed activities stepped out, are typically realized as a sequence of logically connected goings-on, which are known as figures. It comes from the work of Halliday and Matheson. So, for example, figure 1, RNA polymerase attaches to a specific promoter, blah, blah, and then the double-stranded DNA of the gene unwinds and exposes the basis of the template strand. So we've got one activity which in its condensed or unmomented form is called transcription in biology, stepped out as 3 figures, and then kind of condensed, distilled into this nominalization transcription. Now, once we've got it called transcription, we don't keep on going back and stepping it out as figures. It becomes part of our technicality. We can look it up in the dictionary. We can bring it into relationship with other kind of condensed moments of activities. So we can have transcription, and I run out of knowledge of biology pretty quickly here. But that's the point, is that building knowledge in a particular discipline means, yes, we do engage with the momented activities, and yes, we do use kind of grammatical metaphor to create the condensation, but then we don't keep calling a word like transcription grammatical metaphor when it is part of that technicality and is kind of distilled, if you like. So what Jing says, and I think this is a really important kind of, for me, in terms of understanding what's going on, she says, now by using transcription, the unmomented activity, think condensed, distilled, is encapsulated into one discourse semantic choice known as an activity entity. Like entities that are classified as thing and people entities, for example, cells, microscope, researchers, activity entities can enter into lexical cohesion and can be identified, tracked, and substituted in the discourse. So, for example, I could put any or one and there in the discourse, and we could take it back to that activity entity. However, from a grammatical perspective, an activity entity, such as transcription, is realized through a nominalization, which can be mistaken for a grammatical metaphor. Nonetheless, as a discourse semantic choice entity, it maps directly onto a lexicogrammatical choice, a nominal group. Okay, an entity typically realized by a nominal group. So this is a one-to-one mapping between the strata of discourse semantics and lexicogrammar, which is congruent or matching, right? There's no grammatical metaphor involved in that context after it's been created. So when it can enter into lexical cohesion and identified, tracked, and substituted in the discourse, we typically don't have grammatical metaphor involved. It's congruent, matching. So that to me is a kind of seminal, kind of top-down, bottom-up, trinocular perspective to be able to test out whether something is operating as a grammatical metaphor or whether it is operating as a technical term. So how do we kind of, summarize there these properties of activity entities? There's a one-on-one mapping between strata of discourse semantics and grammar, and therefore it's congruent. It's a dead metaphor. in Halliday's terms. It can be defined, or well, it is defined as a field-specific activity, and once defined, they're typically not unpacked again in the field. We can generalize across texts. And they're an important resource for reconstruing typically dynamically construed scientific activities in a static way. So we're kind of, this drift towards the noun that Halliday's talking about over, building knowledge. They allow us to kind of create this static fields. And they open up the potential to build scientific taxonomies, which are seminal to the work of science and other related fields. Okay, so we can see that I'm just again presenting this framework back to sort of what are the tools, what's the meta language involved, that we've got the field of item, activity, and property. We've got discourse semantic, kind of an item is generally realized as a thing entity, an activity realized as an activity entity when it's distilled in unmomented, and properties, which we'll get to, realized in many ways. So we've got, in both cases, realized by the noun group, and that's the green bit that we can see operating in our sample text, our government text. So we've got institutional entities distilling people. We've got semiotic entities distilling text itself, okay, law, problems, which are presented in text, and one activity entity as vandalism that is introduced. So again, we get a strength-based approach, being able to see that we have academically valued entities of institutional and semiotic entities that can be remarked on, but we can look at the activity entities and think, aha, here is a chance to build further technicality. So how can we support the student to do this? And this is now we can help them to extend their taxonomies by helping them to build unmomented activity from the momented activities that they had stepped out in their original. So we could help them to think governments are necessary because they provide law and order and prevent violence. I think I had law as a semiotic entity in the last one. Of course, there's a bit of slippage before that, but I think in terms of its law and order, we have that as a technical semiotic entity. The federal government looks after national affairs such as national defence, foreign policy, immigration. These are all technical terms that have been distilled from the momented activity, education, law enforcement. So we've got something to work with from the field of creating more valued technical understandings of what's going on at each level of the government. Okay, so now let's just move into, and I won't have much time to spend on this, but I think it's the most fascinating new area for me that has answered a lot of questions, and that is looking at the, I have to move this again, looking at naming of kind of taxonomies and properties. And in this case, I think the work on dimensions of entities, and I used to always just say dimensionality or dimensions, and Jing reminds me, always talk about it as dimensions of entities, that can help me to understand the work of a lot of nouns that I get shoved into the box of abstract generic shell nouns. That's been very helpful. So for example, if we look at this rewritten as part of the text, a government can be defined as an organisation that has the official power to manage a particular group of people. A society as large and complex as modern Australia faces a variety of issues at different scales. The management role thus needs to be played by 3 different government levels to match the different scales of issues. Now, those underlined words that we have there have often not been picked up in teachers' analysis of abstraction. If they have been picked up, they haven't really been systematically explained in terms of the job that they're doing. And they're incredibly important. When we look at development of writing across the years of schooling, we can see that the more knowledge, the more we know about an item or an activity entity, the more we're building relationships between it, and we're kind of grouping. So the more an entity is dimensioned, group of, variety of, scale of, the more knowledge is developed. So I really recommend that you follow up on this notion of dimensions of entities to kind of see how useful it might be for seeing how how you can also think about development. See, I'm getting tired now. Nearly time for coffee. Anyhow, look, I'll finish soon, but I just want to kind of look at this from an early years perspective, where already we've got little texts here that are very much not in a taxonomic way. A student in year 1 moving into taxonomizing in terms of different types of snakes, and then Harry in year 4 who's looking at different types of energy, and within that is able to use this dimensions of entities. It's a source of renewable energy, not just a renewable energy, but a source of. It's an example of. So these provide a kind of a marker of a deepening taxonomy that Harry is developing, being able to look at this notion. Now, I just need to absolutely, before I think, looking at, I should have had this slide earlier, of what Jing talks about when she's talking about this notion of dimensions of entities, that we can systematically look at these in terms of the nouns that are often in the focus group, if you like, the color of, the shape of, the texture of, to look at meanings of perception, to look at meanings of measurement, particularly in mathematics and science, the size of, the weight of, the height of. And of course, it doesn't always have to be in the focus group. It can be, blue color, right? So you can have it as the main noun, as well as in the focus part of the noun group. Composition, the part of, the component of, the layer of, the structure of, the feature of, all of those incredibly oft used ways of introducing an entity through the dimension, through the composition, or of course the classification, a type of, a kind of, a category of. There are many, and of course we also have, so here's the it can be realized through the focus group, or just having trouble getting my whole screen to show, a thing and classifier structure. Okay, so cell types, right? So even though it's the main thing in a noun group, it is actually, from a discourse semantic point of view, giving information about the dimension, the property of the cell. Okay, so it's very important to get that idea of the work that it's doing in terms of field. And of course, we've got biological, field-specific ways of categorizing: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, all of these kind of things. And what when we worked with this notion in our year 4 class in a project, the idea of talking about card playing, cards as being divided into suits: hearts, spades, diamonds, and clubs. So being able to bundle information about the different category items and be able to call them, name the group that they are. And I think that's been a really important educational application of the work. So in a teacher's toolkit, we can assist students to sort of sort out properties and taxonomic relations which are critical for knowledge. And they can be recontextualized as bridging terms which retain the connection to the linguistic meta language. So parts, types, appearances of living things. We can actually see what that means linguistically in terms of dimensions. So we can, look at the notion of bundling in year one. We can look at labeling the categories and talking to students about how that might be labeled. The notion of kind of using this dimensionality in topic sentences, types of snakes. There are many different types of snakes. Snakes can be different in sizes and have different amounts of poison. Look at how wonderfully useful these dimensions of entities help the student to create a macro theme or hypertheme in this little report. So it's got a whole range of uses. Now I won't go on to how, well, I will just very briefly in terms of closing up. I focused on activity entities and their dimensions as ways that this development can be supported in a text. But grammatical metaphor is always, at play in terms of being able to carry meanings through the text. And when we've got state governments are more necessary for managing problems in Australia. This level of government is directly responsible for the prevention of violence, the destruction of property. So we still have very active use of grammatical metaphor for bringing the meanings through the text and packaging and unpackaging the meanings. They're not technical terms themselves, but they are made by the student as they go through the text in order to be able to do that prediction and summarizing work. Okay.
There are 7 minutes left, and there are
okay, I'll finish now.
Question.
Great. I'll finish now. How also goes on to talk about grammatical metaphor in terms of building the technical terms in the first place. And that's really important to note, that we have to look at the text itself, not just think, oh, creation is that, reproduction is that, kind of a technical term. Well, let's look at the context of whether or not it's creating the definition in the first place where grammatical metaphor is used. Okay, so we can look at evaluating the field. Once we've made these activity entities, it's really important the work that they do to enable that. And I'll just finish with this overview from Jing's paper, which I know you'll all rush out to find, and stop there. So thank you very much. Any questions? Absolutely keen to try to answer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for such a fascinating presentation, Sally. So there are 2 really interesting questions in the chat from Lucy and Mus. Would you like to ask Sally directly to make it more interactive, or would you like me to read the questions?
I think the questions are kind of related, so you might like to give Sally both of them and she can.
Oh, look, I've got them in the chat now, so I can have a look. Let me just go there, because then it'll give me time to oh, look, well, I just noticed, Vin, you raised your hand. I'm very sorry that I didn't see that. You've got to be very aggressive with me. You just got to kind of interrupt me, Okay, what's Mus saying? Just wondering if you need to recontextualize the idea of stratification. Yeah, discussing the idea of activity entity involved 3 strata, and I feel the distinction between field and discourse might be difficult to tease apart for non-specialists. Look, yeah, Mus, are you there? And can you kind of help? Look, Mus is entirely correct that I really did obfuscate some very important relationships between the 3 strata, and I just feel at this stage it's a little bit out of my kind of comfort zone to do that coherently. So I'll follow that up with any requests that come.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. I was just wondering because in my own context, if when we use Chinese translations of these terms, right, and it's very difficult to explain why I'm using two terms, for example, especially to non-specialists. So I was just thinking as we talk to these student teacher trainer program or whatever, what kind of strategies do you use to talk about these two distinctions, or
Yes.
is it not important distinction in your
is.
context?
Look, I'm so glad you asked the question now. I was really frightened when I read it, but now I can see exactly, why this is such an important thing to look at. From this perspective of teacher training and professional learning, realization, bringing to light, being able to see the visibility of meanings in a text is really kind of the important, lens that I put on the work. And I guess that kind of working at, okay, what can the grammar tell us? I didn't step that out very carefully in terms of what it couldn't tell us about those meanings. So I'm kind of relying on people to sort of see, oh, okay, we have used the grammar in SFL educational context. We've used the grammar and we've said things like, oh, it's a human actor, or it's we've conflated the kind of discourse meanings onto grammatical abstract noun. I mean, we've kind of done that work over and over and over again, even naming kind of process types and things like that. I think we've done so much conflation that we often don't see that we're often talking at different levels of meaning. And so I think there is a role from a teacher trainer point of view to recognize the strata that we're in, but obviously at the pointy end, when I'm presenting, I'll conflate them all over the place for efficiency. But yeah, it's a huge issue, and I think there's a fantastic presentation to be developed, and I'll be happy to support you on that to to tease out some of these issues, because it's really important.
Thank you so much, Sally. I really loved your presentation.
Thank you so much. Now, Lucy, what was yours?
Sally, can you please stop sharing your screen so people can see you more clearly? So Lucy question, how are teachers going with the meta language of momentic and unmomentic activities?
Yeah, look, honestly, I haven't been near a teacher for a couple of years. Hi, Maria. How are you, darling? Looking forward to your presentation. But yeah, it is the only time that I really used it was with biology teachers in Melbourne in part of Len's project. And I used it and then thought, oh no, this is too complex. And then Christina Love, who was sort of in the audience, she said they loved it. And I think it's like when you've got meta language that is close to context, closer to their own disciplinary context, and you can keep on using the wonderful metaphors that we have, using it, then it can become part of the repertoire of meta language. But I don't think we need, like, if every moment or activity moments, I often use detail, or stepped out. Those are the much more kind of common sense, useful ways. But I think there's that fine-tuned balance between, do we use, do we untechnicalize our meta language at the expense of really missing the accuracy and precision of it? And it's going to be something that troubles every educational linguist because the theory keeps growing, the systems keep growing, the distinctions keep growing, and Jing and Yagan and Jim and others who've been involved in this field have been very careful to keep the terminology separate at each of the stratum. And I think that that's really important, because you don't want that mess of that table that I showed from 2007. But you then have extravagance, and it's up to us to choose and select.
Agree. Yeah, and I think it's very pragmatic around the time we have and what our teachers most need or our students most need. I wonder if some of what we've been talking about, and this is a new thought that I haven't fully developed yet, it's not just the meta-language terms and descriptions we're changing, but I wonder if we actually reconfigure some of the original systems and present them in a way with just enough that our teachers need. So I think we do chop and change things. I don't think we have time to represent the linguistic description in full, and nor is that needed.
And exactly. And Lucy, that's why like I kept showing you the original kind of systems and meta language from the work, you know, some of the work that thing very selectively. And I would never do that. Like that's why these little toolkits, you know, are really good because you can absolutely put the lens on and say, this is for your context. You know, here's a meta language, you know, that is systematized because we still have the three, the strata and the however many strata you want and however many meta functions you want to choose from. We still have it kind of there, and we know we've left out stuff, but we kind of know that it's fitting into some kind of theoretically manner. You know, like we can go up to the theory if we need to in that point, rather than the randomizing kind of notion. And that's why I've always loved the Australian curriculum because it actually does, I mean, less and less, I have to say, it's really quite pathetic, but it actually keeps the meta functions in at least. It doesn't keep, you know, the strata, and it messes up everything else, but it's kind of been really amazing for me to be able to use it and refer to it and say, this is your curriculum, and look how it matches onto the theory of systemic functional linguistics, and feel like I don't have to fudge things at that level.
Okay, hope that answer your question, yeah, Lucy. And
Yes, thank you very much.
yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Sally. So it's time. I think that's enough. If you have any further questions, please feel free to get in touch with Sally. I will put her email address in the chat.
I'm going to put it in now too,
Yep.
just to make
Sally
sure that
Humphrey.
everybody has it. Please,
Yep.
please contact me just to say hello. I get lonely.
In the chat, so I just sent it to one participant.
Oh, here we go. I've sent it there to everybody.
Okay,
Thank
excellent. Okay, so please join us to thank Sally again for her wonderful speech, and we will have 10 minutes for the break this morning, and please come back at 10:45 everyone for other fantastic parallel presentation. So thank you so much again, Sally, and hope you can stay with us to enjoy some sessions this morning. Okay, thanks everyone. Stay on the Zoom and get a cup of coffee or water, and then come back at 10:45. See you again soon. Sally, fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have been a very, very generous host there. It was lovely having you in the chair.
Yeah.
I just realized that I haven't done I haven't done a presentation this long for a while.
You were on holiday. I can
I
enjoy
get tired. I need a nana nap now.